Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ryan Kuhlman, president of the National Real Estate Investors Association. Today, we are hosting a COVID-19 update. We actually have a special guest today, but of course, we also have Charles Tasso, our COO. He is also our Director of Legislative Affairs, and he's going to be giving us some information today. But our special guest is John Bowens. He's the Retail Sales Manager for Equity Trust. It's where myself and a lot of our investors throughout the National REIA network have our self-directed IRAs, and he's going to talk a little bit about that to you guys today as well. So, of course, we want to say welcome today. We hope everybody's being safe and healthy and following all the guidelines so that we can hopefully get through this very quickly and be done with this quarantine by the end of April. We're going to be talking a little bit about that today as well. In the meantime, I'm going to turn it over to our host, Rebecca McLean.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for being here. We want to say a huge thank you to Home Depot Pro for sponsoring our broadcast and our associations. If you don't know about Home Depot Pro and the special relationship that we have with them and what it means to you, please make sure that you contact either your local group or National REIA. They have special programs for investors, things like special discounts. Paint is 20% off at the register. We also have a rebate program with them, and there are other National REIA exclusive programs, such as the appliance program and the cabinet program. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to your local association or to us here at National REIA. National REIA is a 501c6 trade association. We are the only nonprofit association that represents the individual investors, and our mission is to promote real estate and real estate investing and how it's such a great path to financial freedom, to protect our industry, and to educate people on how to best pursue real estate investing. And we want to say a huge thank you to everyone that has joined us today. Thanks for participating. Also, thank you so much for your membership in your local group. If you're a member of a local group, thank you so much for your support. And know that we are doing all that we can to make sure that we keep you informed and updated. And to that end, we have lots of communication tools. If you've been with us before, you've seen this, so I'll go through it really quickly. Of course, the National REIA website, which we are keeping updated on a regular basis, which includes our Voters Voice program. So if we reach out to you with a request to participate in Voters Voice, it means that there's a legislative issue that we really need you to express your voice on, something that's going to affect the industry, and that we need you to talk to your congressman about. There's also realestateinvestingtoday.com. It is our news site. There are daily posts on there, everything from industry updates to legislative updates and just general information about investing. And that, even not during the COVID time, is updated daily and then sent to you in a weekly roundup if you have subscribed. So the weekly roundup will come to you if you need to subscribe to that. If you haven't yet, go to the website at nationalrea.com. There's a sign up form right there on the front page, and you can sign up and get those on a weekly basis. We also are sending ongoing update emails during this time with the COVID crisis, and we're doing these virtual meetings on a weekly basis. Next week, just to let you know, we'll be talking about virtual buying and selling, virtual tours for leasing and for purchasing. We also have, on an ongoing basis, the Real Estate Journal, which is a quarterly publication, the ROI Magazine, which is an annual publication, REIA Now, which is also quarterly, and much, much more. So if you're involved in a local group, you are already receiving those, or should be. So this is the National REIA website. If you're not a part of a local group, you can certainly find a local group to participate with by clicking on just simply the button that says find a local group. You'll get a map of the US. You can choose where you are located or where you want to attend, and you can find a local group there. You also see the button for this period of time, that is the COVID-19 updates, and it takes you to the page where you will see all of the updates that we have. For now, we are highlighting the SBA loan resources, and we'll talk to Charles about a quick update on that in a moment. But you can see that we're highlighting that here because that's the most asked for resource. This does change mostly on a weekly basis as far as what's highlighted, and then the rest of the page goes on to give you information, everything from communications from HUD to downloadable resources to articles that we think that you will appreciate. Now, just to let you know, Charles and I are not attorneys, and neither is John. So any of the information that we're going to give you is going to be to the best of our ability. But if you have specific legal matters or accounting matters or things that need a professional to guide you that are specific to you and your situation, please make sure that you see a professional in your area that can give you advice for specifically your business and for your local situation. So that being said, I'm going to turn it over now to Charles. Charles, go ahead and give us an update on what's going on with COVID right now, and then we'll pass it off to John.
Thank you, Rebecca. Welcome, everyone. This is an interesting time. We've had some adjustments, as it were. Everybody said, hang on, the next 2 weeks are going to be kind of our roughest weeks. That's approximately where we're at this point. And I want to make sure everybody understands there's a lot of questions out there on modeling right now. Who should be doing what? I think you're going to see some targeted step down in tiers of risk. The different medical folks are working on that. Behind the scenes, I was on a couple of meetings with Homeland Security, FBI, different health departments, and one of the things that they mentioned right off the bat was, as soon as this is over, we have to accelerate the economy. And it's one thing for commerce and for small business to do that, but when I have these guys talking about it, it tells me that that message is coming through pretty broadly. So be ready for some changes. Now, having said that, with the government, there's always a caveat. And let me give one caveat up front. Those of you who've looked at applying for some of these different programs, we're waiting today for the final regs from SBA, or final regs, at least the initial regs, I should say, for SBA for independent contractors and such. That should be coming out anytime now. The EIDL loan, which is the SBA Economic Injury Disaster Loan, you might be aware that that's actually been where we kind of encourage people to look at. The first 1 million applicants to apply could receive a $10,000 advance. That was supposed to be done in 3 days. Well, the SBA has decided in its wisdom that that's not what Congress really meant. So they've decided that the advance would only be based on maybe $1,000 per employee that you have, and that's how they would structure this regulatory process. So it is now a advance once they determine and have gone through the regulatory review of it. And by the way, 3 days is out the window. So they've said, here's the regulations we have so far. And internally within the housing caucus, we were discussing this. This is one of those things that you can apply for this. And I would encourage folks to apply for either the economic injury disaster loan and that initial $10,000, or payment protection program if you've got employees. But be careful in accepting the funds yet. You're going to want to make sure you've got the process in place. You can get the application going through. Talk with an SBA bank if you're walking through it. Make sure you're going to want to work through a bank that you've already working with, because a lot of banks are not taking new clients at this time. First of all, it's difficult enough to do arrangements and meetings. They're not setting up new relationships at this point. So they're going to take care of their current clientele, and then they will open up later on. And right now, most of those banks who work with the SBA are very specifically limited. They're doing 10, 12. I think Lori just mentioned about one of their neighborhood banks was, working 12-hour days. And for most bankers, that's unusual. So no offense to the bankers, but there's a reason we call them bankers hours, right? So understand that these regulations are out there and they're being developed. So the applications, the grants, you can go in for them. The forgivable loans, you can apply for them. But make sure you know what all those regulations are before you finally sign for that loan or that grant. Those regulations are still being written, and until they are finalized, I would encourage you not to accept that money, because you may be accepting money that has new regulations added after you take it. So be careful on that. Apply, get set for it, but do not accept it yet. As soon as we get updates and final regulations and such coming out, we'll be getting that out to you. Look for it on our site. We'll be emailing and blasting it out, but just be careful. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And that actually leads me to my next point, which is scams. There are all kinds of scams out there right now. Everything from the stimulus check side to going after, we'll help you get the government funds. We'll help you get the government money. There are law firms that are doing it, and they're actually, some of them are charging, some of them are not. They have some, at least with a law firm, you're getting somebody who has ethical standards and has to report to a state. And so there's some standards there. Still do your research, check with the Better Business Bureau, find out who they are and such. The other one, and this is something that we'll be sending out some more warnings on. I think we posted some already. Even on the stimulus checks, in the next week or two, that's where it's at right now, the IRS is going to be setting up a page, and they're working with TurboTax presently, so that if you don't already have a direct deposit account with the IRS, for those of us who end up paying checks or paying the IRS rather than receiving money back from the IRS, well, the IRS doesn't necessarily have our deposit number. So there are scams out there saying, hey, go here and put your information in, put your banking number in, put your routing number in. Yeah, that's a bad idea. They call them spear phishing, because they're very targeted phishing programs that are trying to get your information, get your routing number, get your bank number. If you're going to do something like this, we will make sure that we refer you to the IRS page. Please do not click through pages. If you get an email, clicking through will take you most likely to another page rather than actually to the IRS page where you want to go. So I just urge that as caution. Spread that, friends, family, co-workers, residents, be careful on that, because people will get scammed, and bank accounts, meager as they may be, will get scammed and spent down.
Charles, just to let everybody know, the other thing is there are some states that have put a hold on changing your registered agent, your address, and things of that sort. By the way, that's cream soda, folks. It's not drinking on the job.
I'm not day drinking.
Just because you're working from home doesn't mean you get to day drink. But anyway.
I could show my mask here and get the...
But, okay, back to.
There's back to reality here.
States where the Secretary of State has put on hold being able to change things about your business.
Correct.
Because people are going in and changing existing businesses to their information so that they can apply for these things and then have the dollars sent to them. Correct. So just be careful about that sort of thing. And know that, like I said, if your Secretary of State is on lockdown, don't be pulling your hair out thinking that they're being difficult. No, they truly are trying to protect you. Go ahead and give them a call if you need some information from them.
So there are two things I kind of want to follow up on here. One is phase 4. So phase 4, we've had the first 3 phases. Most people are very familiar with phase 3, which is CARES. That's where all the funds are coming, the $2.2 trillion. The phase 4 section is a piece that we are going to be reaching out, and we are from a housing caucus working together trying to figure out what the best way to do that is going to be. We've got some talking points. We're working on those. I expect to have a voter voice piece out probably early next week. When we do, we'll be reaching out to everyone. Please share that with your membership, share it with family, friends, anyone, to get the word out. Because what we want to do is make sure that one of the key pieces to it is actually rental assistance. And yes, there's increased unemployment. There's stimulus checks coming. In some areas, it's not going to be enough, and we're going to need to see additional rental assistance. And rental assistance is specifically for those either impacted directly or indirectly by COVID-19. And the idea is, quite frankly, if you think about it in an economic chain, and that's where we're at. I literally just got off the phone with one of the national papers on this. If rent breaks down, at that point, as you well know, we can't pay the insurance, we can't pay utilities, we can't pay maintenance, we can't pay any of our other staff, the mortgage. and you start seeing mortgage defaults go in, then mortgage defaults increase. Now we've turned something that's a acute issue into a structural crisis and a financial crisis. And that a lot of the business people understand, and the business news writers and such are understanding that. So they're pushing back on the whole, free rent, rent holidays, mortgage holidays, because there's a lot more complication to it than just saying, yeah, we won't pay for a little while. So, but one of the pieces on that is rental assistance, and we're pushing for that through phase 4, so that folks who are legitimately having problems can go into the organizations, get the funding, turn around, cut the checks. Either the checks come directly to the property owner, or it's a joint check to the resident and the property owner. So that's one of the pieces we'll be coming out with, probably, like I said, with a voter voice, and we'll be getting information out to you on that next week. The second one is a request that I have, and I'll after I'm done, I'll put this in the chat so you see it and can cut and paste it. But what we're asking for is this. There's a Wall Street Journal article, there's a CNN article, there's a few different other pieces out there, and they're talking about the percentage of residents who are paying their rent for April, and looking at April 1st through April 5th, and how many people have actually paid. Is that percentage spiking? Is it dropping? Oh my word, do we have a crisis? And what I'm looking for is some anecdotal information from around the country. If you could tell me kind of city, state, where you're at, but also tell me number of units, percentage of payments you've received, and the percentage of workouts you've gone through. And I say had to, but needed to do to work through them with folks. If you can do that from an April 1st to April 5th kind of time frame, like I said, I'll put that in the chat so you can just look at it and cut and paste your answers back. I would really appreciate it. Feel free to do them to it privately, so you don't have to do them out, put everything out publicly or whatever, but want to make sure that information, because I'm using that anecdotally when you talk to stories to say, here's the behind the scenes of what we're actually really seeing, and want to be able to share that with everyone. So again, I'll share that through on the chat, and if people would respond with that, I would greatly appreciate it. And then I'll be hanging out for other questions. Thank you.
A couple other things as well. Just to let people know, if I don't know what you're experiencing out there, but Charles, some of our friends here in Cincinnati on the multifamily side have told me that they're seeing, anywhere from 88 to 92% payments. And so they're not so worried about April. They're concerned about May if people don't get their stimulus check in time, because they feel like people had already started to responsible people had already started to allocate that April payment when many of them got the final, issue with the governor's, when he issued the executive orders in terms of closing businesses. They're concerned more about May, but feel that maybe if those are starting to get into the economy already and into people's hands, that maybe it's not going to be as bad as everybody panicked about originally.
Well, and for perspective, those stimulus checks, the current ones, the $1,200 checks, should be going into the lowest income groups of folks as direct deposits starting on April 13th. So whether they make it there April 13th or the end of the week, we'll see. But those checks are starting to go out, and the IRS is processing those funds as quickly as possible.
Great. I've got two questions for you, and then we need to get to John, and then we'll come back to some other questions. But first of all, there was a refinance question. It says, we are in the middle of a 60-day lock on a refinance, and our broker is warning us that we might not close before the lock ends. We haven't even gone to underwriting or appraisal yet, with 27 days left. Will it be extended for no cost? Are others experiencing or encountering this problem?
That is a darn good question. From what we've been hearing, and I'll defer to John or others on this one, the banks are tightening up dramatically on their loans right now, refinance or new loan. So they're, at the same time, the Fed is pushing them to get money out. So I think it's just an uncertainty of how bad is it going to be. If we start seeing some release on the the tiers or the risk tiers and people starting to come out from the stay-at-home orders, I think you're going to see some relief on that. Having said that, I think everybody right now has, and from what I'm hearing from even from brokers, is a cause of fear that just an echo of 2009, 2010. So everybody's trying to panic and sit still. And I should say they're trying to sit still and not panic, but they're panicking, which is what's causing them to sit still. So that's kind of where we're at on that side of it.
Next question. What's the status of what's available for COVID-19 claim for sole proprietors and independent contractors?
Say that one more time, Rebecca. I didn't.
What's the status of what's available for COVID-19 for sole proprietors and independent contractors?
So that regulation is what's coming out today. So I have not seen it yet today. So as soon as I see it, I'm hoping to get some analysis on it and get it out.
Okay, so we'll move then on to, if you have other questions, let's go ahead and post them into the group chat. But John, are you ready? We're going to move on to John Bowens, and he is with Equity Trust. Many of you have probably seen him either at an equity event, or if you're part of a REIA group, at your REIA group, or if you've been on a national cruise, John has done lots of stuff for us there. So John's the expert for us in the IRA space, and we were getting a lot of questions on multiple things. One, with the CARES Act, there are some provisions in there about IRAs. So wanted to ask John his perspective on that and to give us some information. And also there have been some other questions that I've asked him to address, such as, what if I'm a private lender? I'm lending out of my IRA account. How is all this going to affect me? What should I be aware of? What do I need to do? And so there's several questions that relate to that, as well as those that are landlords and hold their properties inside their IRA accounts. So John, I'm going to let you take it away and start to discuss those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Rebecca and Ryan, Charles, Lori. Really appreciate it. It's always great to be on a call with our national REIA friends. And of course, you guys have done a ton for us over the years, and we'd love to be able to give back. See a lot of names out there that I recognize. So, thank you for all that are Equity Trust clients and Equity Trust supporters. We are a self-directed IRA custodian. I think many of you are familiar with that. Ryan did a great job of introducing. We allow people to buy and sell real estate with their self-directed retirement accounts. And what I want to do is really focus the time here on the CARES Act. I have been spending a lot of time reviewing the CARES Act, and in addition to reviewing the CARES Act, also consulting with various legal professionals to really understand how this is going to impact individual taxpayers, how people could utilize it to their advantage and use it as an opportunity. But not just the opportunity, but also, okay, what are the concerns? So when I first saw this bill starting to manifest, if you will, I initially said, okay, this makes sense. If someone out there is in absolute dire financial straits, they can't put a roof over their family's head, they can't feed their family. I understand that, we need to give those types of people a little bit of relief, and being able to reach into their retirement accounts and not have a premature withdrawal penalty of 10% or some exorbitant tax penalties would be beneficial. But then I also understand that, some people can use this for wrongdoing, if you will. They could sort of abuse the privileges. And so I've been spending a lot of time over the last couple weeks really making sure that I communicate to as many people as possible what this narrative should really be, and when you should use this and when maybe you shouldn't use this. And this would be, of course, not just for folks that are on today's call, but maybe you're working with a tenant. Earlier today, I was talking to one of my tenants in one of my self-directed account properties, and we were talking through the rebate, and if they're going to get that or not. And I was asking them questions about when did you file your tax return? Did you do your 2019 return yet? Right? Okay, let's look at when are you going to get that money? Really communicating, very closely with those tenants is obviously very, very important. And, so this is an aspect of things that we need to know about, because if we're in a situation where we have a tenant and maybe they do need to dip into their retirement account in order to make their month's rent payment. But if they don't need to dip into the retirement account to make their rent payment, put a roof over their head, or feed their family, then you're probably better off, or they're better off, actually keeping that money in their retirement account, because of what I'm so passionate about, and that's what I call compounding interest in the absence of taxation. And I think a lot of you on today's call have probably heard me say that several times before: compounding interest in the absence of taxation. These IRAs, whether it's a self-directed IRA or not, is incredibly powerful from a tax advantage perspective. And so we want to not cannibalize those retirement dollars unless we absolutely have to. So that sort of frames things up for everybody. I'm going to go ahead and jump right into the actual legislation itself. And there are four primary bullets that are going to impact individuals, impact potentially individual investors out there, as well as, maybe your tenants or other individuals that you're working with. And then last but not least, I'll address the private lender question that Rebecca posed. So this is section 2102 of the CARES Act, special rules for use of retirement funds. Number one, so what is it? You can reach into your IRA, your Roth IRA, your 401k, 403b, 457. It's pretty broadly encompassing in terms of retirement. What is a qualifying retirement account? So we're just going to say for the rest of this session, retirement account, which includes IRAs, 401ks, and such. So what the law says is that you can go in and take out up to $100,000 from your IRA, and it could be your self-directed IRA, by the way, if you needed to. Obviously, we would encourage folks to maybe not dip into that account unless they absolutely had to, but if they did need to do it, Equity Trust as a financial institution is prepared to be able to comply with the necessary protocols to allow people to do this. So up to $100,000 you can grab out of the retirement account, and think of it like a distribution that you don't have to pay back for 3 years. So you have from 2020 all the way to 2023, if you will. You have 3 years to pay back that money. Now, some of you are probably familiar with the 60-day distribution rollover. So prior to all of this, you could reach into an IRA once in a 12-month period, take whatever amount you want out, and so as long as you return it within 60 days, there's no 10% premature withdrawal penalty, and there's no taxes. And so think of it like a 60-day distribution rollover, but extended out to 3 years. So again, you got 3 years to pay it back. So let's talk for a minute about, and by the way, they're calling this in the law a coronavirus-related distribution. Coronavirus-related distribution. So that's the terminology I'm going to use. If you want to take a coronavirus-related distribution from your account, there are 3 qualifications that you have to meet. The first one is you have to have been diagnosed with COVID-19, and there's also a string of SARS that's in there as well that's included in the law. So the idea is if you're diagnosed with COVID-19, and this does have to be a test that is through the Center for Disease Control. So as long as it's one of those certified tests, meaning you go to a hospital and you get a certified test, right, and it comes back positive, all right, you qualify. Number 2 is if you have a spouse or dependent that has been diagnosed with COVID-19. Again, they have to meet that criteria and taking that proper test. And then number 3, and the third one is the broadly encompassing, or the more broad one that I'm concerned about that people are going to, in a way, maybe try to abuse. So what it is and what it says is that anyone who experiences adverse financial consequences, all right, anyone who experiences adverse financial consequences as a result of this COVID-19, if they are furloughed, if they are laid off, if they are impacted in any way financially, then they meet the qualifications. And it's self-certifying, right? So if you were to take this distribution, it's not like Equity Trust is going to say, you have to send us from the CDC verification that you've been impacted, or you need to send us some sort of substantiating documentation. It's one of those things that if you're ever audited, you may have to furnish that information. You might have to produce that information. Let me give you an example in the real estate context. So let's say that I'm a commissioned real estate agent, and last year in 2019, between the months of, let's say, March through May, I had $30,000 in commissions. But then now in 2020, I have $0 in commissions. All right, you obviously would have a very easy way to claim that you were in a financial hardship situation and you would qualify for that. So those are the three qualifications. The next item that I want to talk about is the treatment of the coronavirus-related distributions. The treatment of the coronavirus-related distributions. So from a tax perspective, and some of this is still being worked out, how do you file? How do you claim? How do we at Equity Trust document the 1099-Rs? A lot of this has not been completely fine-tuned yet, right? The law got passed. We wanted to get that out to the world, or I'm sorry, the country, as quickly as we could. And some of these finite details haven't been worked out. But by and large, the way that it's going to be treated is if you don't pay back the money within 3 years, then automatically that whatever amount you took out, let's call it $100,000, is going to be distributed evenly across the 3 years. So to use some round numbers for everyone, let's say I took $60,000 out. I took $60,000 out and I don't repay it in the 3 years. So I'm going to have to pay taxes on $20,000 in 2020, $20,000 in 2021, and then $20,000 in 2022. Okay. So if I don't pay it back within the 3 years, it's going to be spread out. Unless I do have the option, the law does allow me to actually pay the tax all in this year. So let's say you know that your income is going to be substantially low in this year, 2020. But in 2021, you feel that you're going to bounce right back. Going back to my example of the licensed realtor making a lot of commission, if they feel they're not going to make any commission this year, maybe they want to actually claim all of that income in the year 2020 and not claim the income in 2021, 2022 over that 3-year period. The idea is we're really hoping that if people really are in dire financial straits, that if they do go in and reach in and take the money out, that they use it for the right purposes, the intended purposes, the spirit of the law purposes, and then they have that 3 years and they get it back into the account within that 3 years. So that way they can continue to start growing the account in a compounding interest in the absence of taxation type environment. All right, so now moving on to the next section, number 3, and this kind of starts to move away from accessing the money and what the qualifications are, and that is required minimum distributions. So for those of you who aren't familiar, required minimum distributions are once you attain the age of 70 and a half or older, you have to start taking money out of your tax deferred accounts. Think traditional IRA, 401k tax deductible, a Roth solo 401k. You do have RMDs as well, 70 and a half and beyond. Let me pause there for a moment and mention that under the Secure Act, which was passed and went into effect January 1, if you weren't already 70 and a half, it's now 72 years old. So not to get into details of the Secure Act, but do know that if you were 70 and a half or older, January 1 prior to, then you're under the same rules. If you turn 70 and a half, let's say, on January 1, then you're going to be grandfathered into this 72 years old. Okay, so if you're under 70 and a half, essentially, you're 72. If you were already 70 and a half January 1, then you have to take these RMDs starting at that age. So ultimately, how the CARES Act is impacting all this is you do not have to take a distribution, a required minimum distribution in the year 2020. Last but not least on that required minimum distribution point, if you had someone pass away in 2019 and you are inheriting their account, you have until April 1st of the following year, so April 1st of 2020, which was a week or so ago, you also have your required minimum distribution suspended. The government's actually done this in the past once before, at least once before. And the reason why they did it is because they don't want to force people to liquidate positions in a portfolio, think stocks, mutual funds that might be at a depressed value. They don't want to force people to have to sell those off to take their required minimum distributions. Last but not least, keep in mind that for those of you that have a Roth IRA that is in your name, so it's not like an inherited Roth IRA, it's your Roth IRA, you do not have to take a required minimum distribution ever, so you don't have to worry about that. I'm not going to get into the Secure Act here, but for those of you that are interested, I do have additional information that I could share with you on the Secure Act if you are interested to know how that impacts you. It came about, signed into law, and then went into effect January 1. For those that are going to leave your IRAs to a child or grandchild, you need to know about this act because you can no longer take the inherited IRA out as a life expectancy. It must be taken out within 10 years. And we are seeing a lot of investors that are looking at converting from a traditional IRA to a Roth IRA, getting the taxes out of the way in the seed so they don't have to pay it on the proverbial crop, or so that their children or grandchildren have to pay it on the crop. So enough on that. Let me get to the last bullet here. 401k loans. So this is an interesting one. You can go in and grab out of the 401k like we talked about before, right? You could distribute from the 401k, you got to return it in 3 years. And 401k administrators are scrambling right now. Companies are scrambling because they are forced to adopt these provisions within their plan documents. But 401k loans prior to the CARES Act, you could only borrow up to $50,000, not to exceed 50% of the portfolio value of the 401k. So what does this mean? Let's say you had a $100,000 401k, you could only borrow up to 50%, which is $50,000 in that example. The CARES Act said, okay, you can borrow up to 100%, not to exceed $100,000. And then of course you have to pay that back, principal and interest, just like the previous laws were written. So that's the 401k piece. Last but not least, I think we covered everything as far as the distributions are concerned in qualifications. So I mentioned at the top of the presentation here, I do want to make sure that the country, I'll say, and investors out there, and let me mention that I know you might be thinking, well, you know, John, equity trust, financial institution, they might be a little bit biased, right? They don't want people taking money out of their retirement account. They want people to keep money in their retirement account. And you know, certainly that there's a situation that we could talk about where, yes, as a financial institution, we don't want people taking money out of their IRA, admittedly, but more importantly, I look at it from a long-term perspective for investors. When I look at compounding interest in the absence of taxation and how powerful it can be over many, many years, it wouldn't make sense for me to dip into my retirement account and use it for non-intended purposes. So, you know, I've been communicating to as many people as I can, even non-real estate investors, even non-clients, that, hey, unless you are in a situation where you cannot feed your family, you cannot put a roof over your head, you can't make your rent, unless you're in that type of situation, absolutely do not reach into that retirement account. Because if you don't pay it back, you're going to have to pay taxes, right? Even though you get to spread it out over those years. And most importantly, you're going to lose the compounding interest in the absence of taxation power that you have in that account. Because I've already had some investors that have reached out to me and they say, hey, you know what? I'm thinking about accessing some of that retirement money, and I'm going to go out and buy some real estate with it. And then I'll just return the money in 3 years. I'll do some flips and I'll return it in 3 years. Well, if you make $30,000 on a flip and you pay about a 33% short-term capital gains effective tax rate on that flip, that's $10,000 in taxes you're paying, leaving you $20,000 left over afterwards. So you're eroding your yield by paying taxes on that. Why not do that same investment in a self-directed IRA and save yourself the $10,000 in taxes? So I just want to be careful and, you know, let folks know out there, if you're talking to other investors, you're an investor yourself and you're looking to get more active in real estate during these challenging times, certainly make sure that you're taking the money out for the right reason, not the wrong reason. All right, so last but not least, what if you are a private lender? You have made a loan secured by real estate, let's assume, with your self-directed IRA. Great question. I have loans out right now, and so I'm looking very, very closely at this. So your timing was impeccable, Rebecca, for asking me this question. And I also have properties in my self-directed investment accounts. And so it's interesting to be able to experience that myself, work with tenants during a challenging time, and also help others work with their tenants and other individuals alike during this challenging time. So if you have a loan out, your IRA has made a loan, it's secured by a property, and let's say you wrote, like I write most of my loans as 12-month term loans. And so if your borrower can't pay you back because they can't finish the rehab, or maybe they're in a situation where they can't sell the house, right? We've already heard that there's situations where appraisers, banks aren't sending appraisers out to properties, or it's significantly delayed. Inspections, working with the city. I personally, have had challenges with that as well, getting in touch with the building departments and, getting inspections done to, point on sale inspections and such. So these are obviously all challenges that real estate investors are having. And if you're in a situation where your IRA has made a loan secured by a property and it's reached maturity, if it has reached maturity, don't let it just sit there. A matured loan in an IRA can be very, very dangerous. So what you need to do if you have a matured loan in your IRA, your self-directed IRA, please reach out to Equity Trust Company. If you have a self-directed IRA with another custodian, we all have very similar practices and procedures. Communicate with your custodian, let them know what's going on. I can speak on behalf of Equity Trust. Most of our employees are working remote. We have 400 employees. About 85% of them are working remote. We are staffed. Our phones are open. We've actually extended our call center hours to accommodate our clients that have these types of questions. Communicate, communicate, communicate. Give us a call. We'll walk you through the process. It's not all that difficult. I personally I just went through it myself. I just modified a loan that I have in my self-directed IRA. And what I did is I did a loan modification. I had my borrower sign notarize. I got it back from them right away. And then I sent that to Equity Trust with a document called a note modification document. So it's a simple Equity Trust form. Call into Equity Trust. We'll give you the document. You sign and date it. You send it in with your signed loan modification. And then what we do is we update the records accordingly. That way it's in the system that your loan has been modified and the maturity date is extended out. That's really important to make sure you keep up on this, because eventually as a custodian, as a regulated custodian, regulators do not like matured loans. And so it's really important that you update your files, and that's for your safety and security as well, right? As a lender, you likely want to do this. Now, I understand that there are some instances or circumstances where an investor may not want to modify a loan, right? Because if you modify a loan, well, then you can't put yourself in the position of eventually foreclosing if that's the situation. So we do have a protocol for that as well. So if you do have a unique circumstance where you do not want to modify the loan, please communicate that to Equity Trust Company and we can help you through that process. Obviously, it's not a one glove fits all type of situation. Everybody's circumstance is different. I even have some clients where their attorneys explicitly advise them against doing a loan modification depending on the circumstance. And if that's your circumstance, we can work with you and your attorney and we could still update the files accordingly. So that's all I got as far as the CARES Act update, Section 2102, and a loan secured by real estate. Oh, I'm sorry. I know Rebecca mentioned about IRAs that have properties if you're a landlording on behalf of your IRA. So let me touch base quickly on that. Ultimately, it's business as usual for us. I'll say we've been really fortunate at Equity Trust. I personally have been really fortunate. And I know that's not for everybody out there, so let me be respectful of everybody's situation. But checks are coming in. Rent checks are coming in. People are using our payment center, and tenants are doing automatic direct deposits into their IRA. So we really haven't seen much of a slowdown, quite frankly, which is great news to report. That's not to say that's going to continue to be that way, but that's just what we've experienced so far. But if you are in a situation where your landlord, you have your IRA asset, and your tenants aren't making payments, obviously in that situation, you're not in a situation where you have to really communicate to Equity Trust. We're not here to monitor rent payments. If a rent payment doesn't come in, a rent payment doesn't come in, and then you pursue accordingly. If you are in a situation where you don't have enough cash in your IRA to be able to satisfy whatever operating expenses you might have on a property, you can make contributions to an IRA, of course. Contributions would be up to $6,000 per year when you're under the age of 50 and up to $7,000 when you're 50 and over. I would encourage folks, April 15th tax filing deadline is coming up. Federal tax filing deadline, yes, has been extended to July 15th, and IRA contributions have followed that as well. So technically speaking, you have until July 15th unless you already file your 2019 return or you file your 2019 return between that April 15th and July 15th time period. I always follow the philosophy of why turn a paper in late when I don't need to. So if you want to max out your IRA contribution knowing that you might need it, whether you're under 50 or over 50, again, 6,000, 7,000, go ahead and get your 2019 contribution in before April 15th. And hey, guess what? If you make the contribution and you absolutely desperately need it, you can always back it out, right? So you can always back that distribution out, given the CARES Act. And if it's a Roth IRA, under the old laws, you could do that as well. You could always back out that money. So that's all I have. Rebecca, I guess I'll flip it back to you. And if there's any questions, I'll hang out for a while, but I'll end there. Thank you so much.
John, thank you so much for that. We do actually have a few questions, so if we could. The first question is, would I qualify for the retirement distribution if I have properties under contract that I can't close on, or properties I can't refinance because all lenders have stopped financing? My business has suffered adverse financing consequences, but I'm not sure this is within the spirit of the law.
Okay, that's a great question. And I'm really glad because I probably should have, I know you did a great job, Rebecca, of throwing that disclaimer out there, but I should probably, as a representative of Equity Trust Company, mention that, I can't give tax, legal, or financial advice, and nor can our firm. But to answer the question to my best ability, I'm actually just going to read you the code section. So it's who experiences adverse financial consequences as a result of being quarantined, being furloughed or laid off, or having work hours reduced due to such virus or disease, being unable to work due to lack of childcare, due to such virus or disease, closing or reducing hours of business. That's important for this particular question. Closing or reducing hours of business owned or operated by the individual due to such virus or disease or other factors as determined by the Secretary of Treasury. So if investor is in a situation where they cannot close on a property as a result of this because they cannot get bank financing, I think they have a very good argument that they are in a financially compromising situation. Where there could be a contrary argument to that is, let's say that person had enough money in the bank to fund those deals. So if they personally had enough money in the bank to fund those deals and they just reached into their IRA because they wanted to reach into their IRA, that would likely be an issue. But if they're in a situation where, hey, I can't close on these deals unless I reach into the IRA and do those deals and then return it to the IRA, then to me, it sounds like they've met those qualifications. They can check with their CPA or tax professional just to verify, but based on what I'm hearing, sounds like they would qualify. I would encourage that individual or anyone on this call is document. Take a snapshot in time of your bank statements. Take a snapshot of time of I'm rejected for this loan, or banks won't cooperate. So that way, if anything ever comes up down the road, let's say 3 years later, you have substantiating evidence.
Okay, several additional questions. Can you please repeat the 3-year IRA withdrawal rule again, and addressing both the Roth and traditional side?
Yep. So the 3-year distribution, so between January 1 and December 31. See, that's interesting. If you took a distribution from an IRA before this started, going back to January 1, they're actually grandfathering you in. Under the initial legislation I read, they said on the start date of the bill, but then they changed it. So that's one thing to know. You can grab up to 100,000. You have to pay it back within 3 years. If you don't pay it back within 3 years, then in 2020, you're going to claim a portion of that. In 2021, you're going to claim a portion of that. It's going to hit your 1040 as ordinary income. In 2022, you're going to be claiming a portion of that, and it's going to be evenly distributed. So if I took 60,000 out and I didn't say I wanted to absolutely claim it all in 2020, then automatically it's going to be 20,000 in 2020, 20,000 in 2021, and 20,000 in 2022. And so I'm actually going to have to amend tax returns in order to achieve this. And that's one of the things that I'm really worried about as well is, you know, from an accounting perspective, from a tax return perspective, from an internal coding perspective on 1099-Rs, nobody knows what to do yet. I've been reaching out to some top legal professionals in the country, tax attorneys, that are like, hey, we don't know this yet, but we're going to have to figure it out eventually. So again, don't do it unless you absolutely need to. The example that I heard before sounded like somebody that is in that type of dire straits.
What if they already have a 401k loan? Can they do another one as long as they stay under the threshold?
Yeah, they actually can. That was put in place as well. So, you know, if someone already has a $30,000 loan out and then they want to borrow more, they are permitted to do that. They would want to make sure they get with their 401k administrator. The only challenge someone might have on that is not all 401k administrators, record keepers, are really set up to do that yet. So it might take you a little bit longer. If you want to do it, start communicating now.
And then just a piece of clarification. So taxes and contributions are extended, but if you've already filed your taxes, is your contribution deadline for contributing to the IRA or your 401k, is that still April 15th? So if you've already filed, do you have to get your contribution in by April 15th?
So if you've already filed your tax return for 2019, when you make a contribution and you file your return, it asks you, even if you're just contributing to a Roth IRA and not getting a deduction for it. So technically, if you've already filed your return, you really can't make a contribution unless you amend your return. So if you still want to make a 2019 contribution, you could make the contribution. You would just want to make sure you amend your return as quickly as possible.
We also had a question, and John, I'll tell you my understanding, and I don't know if you know, but they're asking about the, they've extended, of course, the IRS deadlines, but they're asking if they've extended the 1031 exchange deadline. And is my understanding, the last update I got, which I just went back and double checked my email, last update I got was as of April 6th. So that was 4 days ago. Certainly could have changed, but my understanding is they have not changed that. There's all kinds of petitions before Congress. We've all been kind of asking for that, but it is my understanding they have not extended that deadline. Is that
I've heard the same thing. I've been trying to file that. We don't deal with 1031 exchanges just because an IRA, it's, you know, you're not bound by a certain time period, but you know, I can say that from what I've read and understand, that's pretty consistent.
And just, you know, stay connected. We'll try to put that information out there as well on our pages and on the FAQ. Also, someone else had asked if, since they've extended the deadline, are you going to have to file your extension to be able to take advantage of that deadline change? It is my understanding you do not, but please do not take my advice on that. Ask your tax professional about that, and we will go ahead and try to post a link to the IRS notification on that. I'm almost sure it's already on our site and it does describe that, but if it's not on there specifically stating that, we'll try to modify it to say that. Next question, John, and I think this is a really good one, is Frank Miller is asking, are you seeing individuals with IRAs still lending money like normal, or do you see a slowdown?
No, that's interesting you bring that up is we are processing purchases. In the middle of this, I bought a rental property. In the middle of this, we have clients that are lending money. In the middle of this, we have clients investing in businesses. We have clients buying properties. It's still a little bit too early to say, especially for those that are maybe funding fix and flip deals. I can see that starting to slow down a little bit. But as of right now, we've seen people processing investments at the same velocity as they were in the past.
And then they didn't ask, but I will. If you're lending out of your IRA for a rental property, would you recommend that maybe they have a little different qualifications during this time, or a little more, looking at cash reserves for the individual that's borrowing, or just move on forward?
Yeah, I think, obviously we always resort to and rely on, telling folks to work with an attorney to close a loan like that. If you're loaning money on a existing rental property, the first thing you want to look at, of course, is, okay, if the landlord owns the property free and clear and you're going to get a first on the property, okay, that's making a little bit more sense. If you're going to lend on a second, obviously you're going to have more inherent risk. Just on a personal level, and not that this is advice by any means, but I would not feel comfortable doing that right now with my self-directed investment accounts. Obviously, an assignment of rents would be, something that I want to make sure I put in place as well. So I think that I suspect, I should say, that we will find that private lenders that are very active amongst our community are certainly going to tighten up a bit in terms of their criteria to lend to investors. And certainly with rental properties that, maybe it's in more of a working class type area. I want to know what do those tenants do for what is their occupation, right? And if that occupation is an occupation that I know has been hit hard by this, I'm going to probably be a little bit more concerned about that. So if I'm going to lend, I'm going to want the leases, and I want to know about what's going on with the tenants. I'm doing the same thing as, asking the tenants, hey, communicating with them every single week. How's the job going? What's going on? Visiting the properties. I was just there earlier today. Making sure that their income is stable, and also talking to them a little bit about the rebate, the money, the $1,200, right, and $2,400 for a couple. Because the way they're going to do that is, for those that might not be familiar, is anyone that filed a 2019 return, you're first in line. So if you're in 2019, they're going to do a direct deposit. It's going to go right into your account if you're under those thresholds, right? For a married couple, anything under $150,000, you get the full amount. And then for every $100 over $150,000, it's a $5 discount, if you will. Or I'm sorry, every $5, it's a $100 discount from that amount. And then it peaks out at about $190,000 or so. But ultimately, talking to the tenants and having that conversation about that, if they haven't filed a return yet and they want to get that money faster, they're going to want to make sure they do that. And then they'll go to the 2018 return filers. So people that don't file their 2019 or haven't yet, they're going to have to wait a little bit longer for that money.
We're also being asked, can people share which private lenders are still lending? None of mine are for refinances. I've contacted many, and so far none are. The only one I found was a fix and flip with very untenable terms, 40% down, 5 points. Maria, I'm going to tell you probably to reach out to the REIA group in your area for those private lenders. I don't know that we all have resources available here online. Also, next question. Question is, property reassessments for 2020 in Louisville, Kentucky have been delayed until 2021. Have other cities or states done the same? So if you have information about that in your state, please put it in the chat bar. The other thing too is Anna Mills contributed that she got a notice that 1031s have moved to July 15th. I have not seen that. That's not the last information that I had received. So maybe check with your CPA, but it sounds like it has the date may have moved. So check with your CPA about that. Any other questions?
Hey, Rebecca, one item I looked here, Doug mentioned, and I'm glad he brought this up. So if you were to take this distribution, this $100,000 distribution, again, January 1 to December 31 of 2020, the clock starts ticking when you actually take the distribution for when you need to pay it back, which means, let's say you don't take a distribution until December. Let's say December 1, you take your distribution. So the clock is going to start ticking on December 1 of 2020 for your 3 years. And Doug prompted me for that question. That's certainly a good one. As far as amending returns and how all that's going to work, again, we're still trying to figure that out. We're still waiting for direction from the IRS on how all that's going to work.
Okay, John, I think we've answered most of, wait a minute. Joe Kirkland said late yesterday, so it was after the 6th. So late yesterday, the IRS issued notice 2020-23 extending a variety of deadlines, including 1031 deadlines. Although the notice is confusing because it's not written like the typical disaster relief notices, the notice extends any 45-day or 180-day deadline that occurs between April 1st and July 14th to July 15th, 2020. And that's in the chat bar, guys, if you want to read that for yourselves. So it does look like they have finally taken action and extended that 1031 notice. One more question, John?
Yep, sure.
If I currently have a 403B, but would like to switch to a self-directed IRA, what is the process like now? And do you think it's a good idea to do right now?
Yeah, so if that 403B is with a previous employer, most likely they're a teacher or maybe they work for a state government or a nonprofit. 403B is really the same as a 401k, but for those types of occupations. And so if you're no longer working there or you're 59 and a half or older, you should be able to go ahead and roll that money over and do a self-directed IRA. What I'll tell you is, you know, and I'm a bit biased because I represent a self-directed IRA company, but you know, yes, you could roll it over into a self-directed IRA. You could really roll it over to any IRA for that matter. It's going to be a lot easier for you if you want to take advantage of the corona-related virus distribution. It's going to be a lot easier for you to take that out of an IRA administratively than a 403B. Because a lot of the administrators for 401ks and 403bs are still trying to scramble to figure all this stuff out. For IRAs, it's one singular form. We could do it for you within 48 hours. It's very fast. So you'd probably be better off to go ahead and roll it over to the self-directed IRA, take out what you need, leave what you don't need, invest with what you don't need in the account, and then use whatever you need in the account. Good to know that if you take a distribution, a corona-related virus distribution, you can return it to any IRA. So if you took it out from Fidelity and returned it to Equity Trust, or you took it out from Equity Trust and returned it to Fidelity, that's fine. You don't have to return to the same account. You just have to return it to an account. And the one other thing that I'll mention too, because I'm sure we're wrapping up soon, but if anybody is interested in more COVID-19 information as it pertains to IRAs, we've been keeping up on the legislation. I've been writing a lot of articles. My team has. On our website, we do have a whole section on COVID-19 to make sure that our clients and the public is familiar with how things work with an IRA. You can go to trustetc.com, Equity Trust website, and we have that sort of portal and center for people to look up more information on it.
John, if you don't mind, we'll link then our site to yours for IRA questions.
Sure.
People have those, and we'll move that closer to the top as well. One very last question, and by the way, Lori put Equity's
oh yeah,
website address right there, the URL right there in the chat bar. So if you want to go there directly, we'll have it there. If you don't happen to remember that or don't go there now, we'll put it on our website so you can just quickly jump over. One very last question, just to reminder, you had said earlier that if someone had taken a 401k loan, they could take another one as long as it was under the max. How much, can you remind the audience how much that max was again?
Yeah, the maximum amount you can borrow is up to $100,000. Obviously not to exceed, 100% of your value of your 401k. So if your 401k is only 80,000, you can only take up to 80,000. And of course, look at the value of your securities that are in that account. Most people with 401ks, they're invested in mutual funds. And so if they're going to liquidate when the value is 75% of what the original value was, it might not make sense for you to do that. So, just make sure you look at your portfolio and make that decision accordingly.
John, thank you so much for being with us today. We really appreciate your input and guiding us through this process. For those of you that want to follow up with that, go ahead and visit the Equity website. We've got the URL right there. And John, I know will be providing some webinars through Equity themselves. We'll try to put some links up there for those as well. So I know they'll be doing updates as time goes on. Thank you all for being with us. Charles and Ryan, any parting words really quickly?
Charles, you go first.
I say, wish everybody a good Friday, a great Easter, and stay safe.
And yes, we will be back again next Friday to resume the COVID-19 updates. So again, like Charles said, we appreciate everybody joining the call today. Thank John Bowens from Equity Trust Company. Thank you to Lori Hudson and to Rebecca McLean for organizing. Thank you, Charles, as well. Everybody stay safe and healthy. Have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you next Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
See you next week.